First time ever, early voting was possible in our state. Since the presidential primaries were already decided, though, the turnout was really low. But the Secretary of the State called the process a success and a good primer for the general election in November. Some state Republicans would like to see some changes, though, when it comes to making our election laws tougher. Joining me now is Senator Rob Sampson, a Republican from Wolcott. Good to see you, sir. Thanks for coming in, joining us on Face the Facts. You, of course, are on the Government Administration and Election Committee, so this is something that's in your purview. Let's start with early voting, and I'd like to get to absentee voting as well. First, 4 days of early voting in the primary, a dry run for November. What was your opinion on how it went? I
did hear some feedback, Mike, from people around the state. And I guess the one response that I heard most often was that it was very time consuming, that people ended up, taking several minutes out of their day. And I'm concerned that when we have a lot more turnout, like we may have in the primary and certainly in the general election, that it could end up being a situation where, there's long lines, that sort of thing. Other than that, there's a few other unknowns that need to be resolved. I mean, certainly the funding for some of the larger municipalities. I mean, the Democrats created this, early voting scenario, arguing that they needed to create more access for people. And that's great, except for the fact that they did not really do anything to provide access because they didn't fund the ability for these towns to have more than one polling location.
Right.
Take a big city like Bridgeport. I think they have, 25 or 30 polling locations normally. Well, they've got one for early voting. And that may change with some money.
Right.
But
and
so
the
far,
Secretary of the State has been asking for money from the get-go, so it's going to have to kind of meter itself out, I guess. So let's look ahead to the general election coming up in November. 14 days there of the same situation where you can vote early. Your opinion on that? General election is much bigger. It's a presidential year, so that's going to put a little bit more strain on the polls. What's your vibe on how that's going to go?
Right. I've never been opposed to early voting necessarily. Okay. I think 14 days, especially in our first go-around, is a lot. I think initially the Secretary of State even wanted to limit it to 7 days. As Republicans, we offered, I think, 3 days within 5 days, at least to start off with, so we can start to build on our ability to be able to do this efficiently and effectively. Remains to be seen how it's going to work out. Right. I'd like to see some funding go to the towns because I don't want to overwhelm the very hardworking folks that take care of our elections as it is. I don't want to discourage people from doing that job more than anything.
Right, and we know that sometimes they face threats. Some of them are all retirees and they might be fearful and other reasons why it's hard to get poll workers to begin with. So we need to try to keep.
Yeah, I mean, even beyond that, I mean, they're exhausted. I mean, I talked to one registrar of voters, just worked this presidential primary 4 days with a day break in between, and she said it was exhausting just by itself.
So yeah, and it's going to be a much bigger lift when it comes to the presidential election. Let's see here. After the absentee ballot debacle in Bridgeport, where they had to have two primaries, two general elections just to decide, the mayor of the city. Security and trust in our elections was thrust both into the public discourse, but also in your lap as a legislator. Your committee is calling for stricter election laws. One of them included getting rid of the drop boxes. Discuss that and what is the motivation behind that?
Yeah, so the Bridgeport debacle, as you called it, I mean, was a big eye-opener for a lot of people in the state.
It went to court. I mean, there was a lot to it.
Not an eye-opener for me, though, because this is something that I've been warning about for years. In fact, I've been, debating and voting on this type of policy in the Elections Committee and in the Senate for a number of years, and always pointing out that our absentee ballot system, which I think is the problem in Connecticut. Our election system overall, I think, is pretty tight. Yep. We keep our paper ballots. We use machines not connected to the internet, that kind of thing that a lot of people have been concerned about, 2020 and all of that stuff. But we do have an issue with absentee ballots and mail-in voting. And, this is something that used to be reserved for just a few people, 1% of the population, people that legitimately couldn't vote for whatever reason.
Right, if you're homebound or things like that.
Now that we've expanded that into making virtually everyone, in fact, no excuse absentee voting will be on the ballot also. Right. Once that happens, you're talking about, a huge numbers of people voting that way, and our system's just not ready for that.
One of the concerns regarding Bridgeport is that party operatives can hand out a bunch of those absentee ballot applications at the very least. Should that change as far as who can distribute them, who can collect them? Do you think that's good as we speak now, or would you like to see that change?
Yeah, that's one of the main changes I'd like to see. And we witnessed some of this. I think, ballot harvesting has always been the issue. But
now, that's happened before the drop boxes, though. Ballot harvesting has been an issue for a long time.
Right. Well, the drop boxes is just one mechanism to return ballots after they're done. And I don't think it really matters, to be honest with you. I mean, the Democrats are talking about putting cameras on ballot drop boxes. And, look, that's fine. I don't object to it. I don't think it's going to solve anything, though. What needs to happen is we need to tighten up the mail-in voting system, period. We need to have an ID requirement. We need to clean up our voter rolls. And we also need to eliminate the unsolicited mailing of those applications, because I think that's the big problem, is now you have campaigns and maybe municipalities. I think the city of Hartford's actually talking about spending taxpayer money, millions of dollars, to mail out these voting applications or ballot applications. I don't think that's necessary. I'd like to keep the same rules in place, but make it so that individuals can ask. That way, only the appropriate people are actually involved in the process. No one is having their vote restricted or anything like that. They still have the access, but we save on the expense and we save on the potential for fraud.
Senator Rob Sampson, we have to leave it there. Thanks for joining us. Hope you'll come back.